He showed up in a tailored suit, ready to lead the biggest summit of the year. But hotel staff looked right past him, told him to wait outside. What they didn't know? He was the CEO, the man signing the checks. And in the next hour, he wouldn't yell, he'd walk. With every investor and every ounce of respect they never gave. This isn't about anger, it's about power, dignity, and knowing when silence speaks loudest. The morning air in downtown Seattle had a bite to it. Clean, sharp, and full of expectation. At precisely 7:57 a.m., a black Audi e-tron rolled up to the curb outside the Helix Grand, one of the city's most prestigious boutique hotels. Out stepped a man in a tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, and a minimalist black tie. His name was Malcolm Cross, and he was the founder and CEO of Crosspoint Ventures, one of the fastest-growing investment firms on the West Coast. His cufflinks gleamed as he adjusted his jacket. Everything about him, his stride, his expression, his presence, communicated purpose. But it didn't seem to matter. The valet, a young man in a red Helix uniform, looked straight at Malcolm and then looked away. He gave a polite nod to the man in the BMW pulling up behind Malcolm and stepped toward the second vehicle. Malcolm waited, holding his keys in a loose grip, watching as the valet passed him completely. "Morning, sir," the valet said brightly to the white driver, opening the car door. Malcolm exhaled quietly through his nose, then walked around and parked his own car in the corner of the lot. No big scene, no confrontation, just one more tiny reminder. Inside, the hotel's glass foyer glowed with soft lights and muted jazz. Malcolm walked across the marble floor toward the front desk. "Good morning," he said. The woman at the desk didn't look up. 1 second. He waited. After several more keystrokes, she finally glanced at him, quick, almost startled, and then said, "Can I help you?" "I'm here for the Summit Core Tech Roundtable. Crosspoint reserved the Linden Room for our sessions." "Are you with a vendor?" she asked. Malcolm's expression didn't change. "No, I'm the host and the keynote speaker." She paused, her eyes flicking to his face again, and then back to her screen. "We're still getting the room ready," she said, the edge in her voice slightly defensive. "If you don't mind waiting outside, we'll come get you." "Outside? I think I'll wait here," Malcolm replied, calm but clear. Another staffer, a young man with a walkie-talkie and clipboard, appeared behind the desk. He glanced at Malcolm like he was looking for a delivery badge. "You with security?" "No," Malcolm said. "I'm Malcolm Cross. This is my event." The man raised his eyebrows, clearly surprised. Give us a few, sir. We'll find someone for you." As Malcolm turned to wait near a side wall, he noticed a group entering the lobby. A white man in a checkered blue suit flanked by 2 assistants. Laughter, handshakes, a warm welcome from the same front desk staff. They didn't ask him to wait outside. They didn't ask his name. They didn't even check a list. Malcolm watched it all in silence. He wasn't angry, not exactly, but something deep inside him chilled. It was the same feeling he'd had too many times in his life, of being seen and unseen at once, of being mistaken for less, even when you are more. He stepped back outside, phone in hand, and looked up at the sleek tower rising above him. His company had paid for 2 floors of suites, full event catering, media rights, and custom signage. His face was printed on the program. His name was on every banner. But none of that mattered the moment he walked through those doors, because they didn't expect a black man to be the one signing the checks. And that was the entire problem. His phone buzzed. "Hey, boss," came the voice of his assistant, Mariah. "You all checked in?" Malcolm stared at the revolving doors. "Not exactly." Mariah didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. She'd worked with Malcolm long enough to know the tone of his voice when he said, "Not exactly." It meant something had happened, something insulting, something familiar. "You want me to come down there?" she asked, quietly. Malcolm glanced across the street. A dog walker passed by, earbuds in. A coffee delivery guy weaved through traffic on an electric bike. Normal life. Unbothered. Meanwhile, He stood there in a $1,000 suit like he didn't belong. "No," he said. "Stay with the investors. They'll be arriving soon. I'll take care of it." He ended the call and walked back through the hotel doors. The same receptionist spotted him again. "Sir, I thought I asked you to wait outside?" "I did," Malcolm said calmly. "Now I'd like to speak with your event coordinator." "I told you. My name," he said, voice steady, "is Malcolm Cross. I'm the CEO of Crosspoint Ventures. We booked the Linden Room for today's Summit Core Roundtable. We also reserved 24 executive suites, 2 media rooms, and catering for over 50 guests. Now I'd like to speak to someone who understands that." The young man with the walkie-talkie reappeared, this time blinking rapidly. "Wait, you're the Malcolm Cross?" Malcolm offered a small, tight smile. "The one and only." The staff looked at one another. Something shifted, not a full realization, but a tremor of discomfort, like a stone had just dropped into the calm water of their assumptions. "I'll get Alicia," the front desk woman said quietly, finally making eye contact. But it didn't matter now, because what needed to be said had already been said, and what hadn't been said, that spoke even louder. Malcolm stepped to the side and let them scramble. He didn't yell, didn't call them racist, didn't demand an apology, because at this point in his life, he wasn't interested in performances. What he wanted was accountability. As he waited, a few early attendees began arriving. One, an older white investor in a navy blazer, greeted Malcolm with a hearty "good morning," completely unaware of what had just happened. Another walked right past him, nodding politely at the front desk staff who had tried to keep Malcolm outside. The irony wasn't lost on him. Then, finally, Alicia, the hotel's senior event coordinator, rushed in from the back hallway, a branded folder in hand and urgency in her steps. "Mr. Cross, I'm so sorry. No one told me you'd arrived. Please, come with me." He nodded but didn't say a word. As they walked toward the conference wing, staff members parted like water around him. The receptionist didn't meet his eyes. The young man with the clipboard suddenly busied himself with the phone. None of them apologized. But that was okay, because what was coming next wasn't for them. Inside the Linden Room, lights were dimmed for the opening panel. Crosspoint's branding adorned every surface: banners, screens, welcome packets. Caterers adjusted platters on linen-covered tables. AV staff adjusted mic levels. Mariah glanced up from her notes. "Everything okay?" "We're not staying," Malcolm said. Mariah froze. "Wait, what?" "I want you to call the Pinnacle Hotel," he said. "Get us the Orchid Ballroom. Move everyone. I'll cover the penalties here personally if we have to." She blinked, but she didn't question him, not for a second. Malcolm pulled his phone from his pocket again. "Call catering, AV. Get our vendors moving. Don't make it about drama. Just make it happen. We relocate, quietly, efficiently." And then he added, "We don't argue with people who didn't recognize us. We just don't let them profit from us." Within 20 minutes, the shift had begun. Mariah had made the call to the Pinnacle Hotel, one of Seattle's newer luxury venues known for its inclusive approach and state-of-the-art facilities. The manager, a woman named Denise who had worked with Crosspoint before, picked up on the first ring. "You need space?" she asked. "You've got it." The Orchid Ballroom was cleared. AV techs were redirected. Catering would be a little late, but they'd make it work. While Malcolm remained composed in the lounge beside the conference room, Mariah and the junior coordinators began quietly signaling to the arriving guests. "Small change of plan," she whispered to one. "We're moving to a better venue just a few blocks over. Follow the link I just texted. There's a shuttle waiting." There was no announcement, no blast email, no confrontation in the lobby, just a quiet exodus. By 9:10 a.m., over half of the guests had vacated the Linden Room. At 9:15, a confused hotel manager finally arrived. "Mr. Cross," he began, folder in hand, "I understand there may have been a misunderstanding at the front desk this morning. I want to personally apologize." Malcolm stood up slowly. This isn't about your apology." The manager hesitated. "Can we make this right?" "You already had the chance," Malcolm replied. "You had it at the valet. You had it at reception. You had it when I introduced myself the first time." The manager opened his mouth, but Malcolm wasn't finished. "This wasn't a mistake, it was a pattern, and I've learned not to stay where I'm only respected after I say my title." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Because while the manager spoke, investors were disappearing. Quietly, efficiently. Staffers still tried to offer water. Conference signs still stood. But the crowd was thinning fast, and no one knew why. By 9:30 a.m., Malcolm was already in a black SUV, en route to the Pinnacle Hotel. Mariah rode up front, still fielding logistics. Behind him, the Helix Grand was unraveling. Conference signage left untouched, staff standing awkwardly beside untouched coffee trays. In under 1 hour, the most high-profile tech event of the week had disappeared. No social media rants, no shouting in the lobby, no scenes, just gone. At 10 a.m., Malcolm took the stage at the new venue. The Orchid Ballroom was even better than the last. Sunlight filtered through glass panels, and the seating had been rearranged to feel more intimate, more connected. Malcolm stood behind the podium. No tie, jacket off. His presence was sharper than ever. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to thank you all for your flexibility." Polite chuckles rippled through the room. "I know the venue change was unexpected, but I believe where we choose to gather reflects what we value." A few heads nodded. This morning, I was reminded that polished lobbies don't guarantee professionalism. I was reminded that being seen isn't always the same as being acknowledged. Silence. I didn't yell, I didn't tweet, I didn't threaten. I simply chose to take my business somewhere that recognized it the moment I walked through the door. Applause broke out. Slow, rising, resonant. Malcolm smiled slightly, then added, "If you take anything away from today, about leadership, about legacy, remember this. Sometimes the loudest message isn't confrontation. It's departure." He paused. Then he tapped the first slide on the screen behind him. "Let's build something better." And just like that, the summit began, not with controversy, but with clarity. The summit went on flawlessly. Panels were insightful. The investor Q&A ran long, not because people were confused, but because they were engaged. Connections were made. Startups pitched, seed rounds got soft commitments, and every time someone raised their glass of sparkling water or glanced at the welcome packet, Malcolm's name was there. But it wasn't his name they were talking about over lunch. It was what he'd done. Or rather, what he didn't do. By mid-afternoon, the whisper had gone corporate-wide. "Did you hear what happened at Helix?" Cross moved the entire summit, quietly. No drama, no press release, just class. It's already costing them other bookings. Malcolm, however, didn't engage with any of it. While others talked, he stayed focused. He walked the halls of the Pinnacle between sessions, spoke to founders, thanked staff, reviewed pitches. He stayed present, not for the cameras or the applause, but because showing up for others was part of his code. And then came the moment that brought everything home. Late in the day, in a quiet break room next to the ballroom, a junior analyst named Jordan Nguyen approached him. Jordan couldn't have been older than 24. He wore a slim gray suit and held his tablet like it was a security blanket. His posture said confidence, his eyes said uncertainty. "Mr. Cross?" he asked, hesitant. Malcolm turned. "Yes? I just wanted to say, thank you. For how you handled the hotel thing. I saw what happened. I got there just after you. I saw them ignore you. I watched you park your own car." Malcolm nodded. "You weren't supposed to see that. But I did," Jordan said, "and it mattered." They stood there for a moment, the hum of the espresso machine the only sound between them. "I've been the only person of color in every room I've worked in since I graduated," Jordan continued. "And sometimes I wonder if I'm doing something wrong. If maybe I should shrink myself a bit, just to fit." Malcolm's gaze didn't waver. "You ever think that way?" "I used to," he admitted. "When I was younger, when I thought the only way to win was to be twice as good and half as loud." Jordan cracked a nervous smile. "That sounds familiar." Malcolm leaned forward slightly. "Let me tell you something my father once told me," he said. "You don't exist to make anyone comfortable. You exist to build, to create, and the space you build shouldn't ask anyone to shrink to enter it." Jordan swallowed. "So, what you did today wasn't for them," Malcolm finished. "It was for people like you, to see that you don't need to raise your voice to raise a standard." They shook hands, and just before Jordan left the room, Malcolm added, "And when it's your turn, don't settle for access, build ownership." Jordan left, shoulders squared. And Malcolm stood alone for a moment, sipping cold coffee, watching the sun begin to drop over the city. He thought about all the rooms he'd entered in his life, the ones where he was ignored, the ones where he had to prove himself 3 times over, and the few rare ones, like this one, where he didn't have to say a word to be respected. That was the difference, and that was the legacy he wanted to leave. The next morning, Malcolm arrived early at the Crosspoint Ventures office, long before the first espresso machine hissed or the elevators chimed. His key card clicked quietly, and he stepped into the sunlit glass and concrete lobby, sleek, modern, and warm in all the ways that mattered. The receptionist looked up with a bright smile. "Good morning, Mr. Cross." "Morning, Nicole," he replied, and stepped into the elevator. When he reached his floor, he paused outside the boardroom. Through the glass wall, he saw Mariah inside with 2 of the new associates, reviewing pitch decks. They looked focused, confident, at ease, comfortable in a space that saw them. He moved on to his office and was halfway through his first cup of coffee when a knock came. "Come in." It was Renee Watkins, Crosspoint's newest VP of Strategy. Smart, composed, black, and often the only woman in investor briefings. She stepped in and handed him her tablet. "Just wanted you to see this." Malcolm scanned the screen. It was a blog post, modestly titled, published by a mid-sized tech culture outlet. "What Quiet Power Looks Like: How a Black CEO Redefined Leadership at a Seattle Summit." The article included no direct quotes from him, no angry rants or hashtags, just a clear, thoughtful timeline of what happened, what people saw, and what it meant. It had already been shared over 3,000 times. "Did you leak this?" he asked, smiling. "Nope," Renee said. "But I did see 2 CMOs post it with the caption, 'Leadership Worth Following.'" He set the tablet down and leaned back. "I didn't do it to make a point," Malcolm said. "I know," Renee replied. "That's why it made one." She turned to go, then paused at the door. The hotel reached out, by the way. Their general manager offered a formal apology and a year of complimentary executive booking. Malcolm let that hang in the air for a beat. "Delete the email." "You sure?" "Yeah. Trust isn't a coupon." She nodded once and left the room. Malcolm looked out his window. The city was waking up, cars rolling past, streetlights blinking off. Somewhere in a boardroom, someone was reading that blog post, reevaluating their own blind spots. And somewhere else, someone was watching the story spread, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. Later that week, Crosspoint quietly announced their next summit would be hosted in partnership with the Pinnacle hotel chain, a move that sent a clear signal, even if it wasn't framed as one. 2 other firms followed suit. The original venue, the Helix Grand, began to feel the effects. Nothing public, no protests, just a slow, noticeable retreat of high-profile clients. They didn't lose face, they lost presence. And that, Malcolm thought, was louder. One afternoon, he found himself in the break room refilling his mug when Jordan, the young analyst from the summit, stepped in. "Hey, Mr. Cross." "Hey, Jordan." They stood in comfortable silence as the machine churned. "I saw that article," Jordan said. "I sent it to my dad. He runs a business down in Richmond. Told me he's never seen someone handle a moment like that and still come out on top." Malcolm raised his mug. "Tell him I appreciate that." Jordan hesitated, then asked, Do you think they'll ever stop seeing us as outsiders? Malcolm smiled. Not with cynicism, but clarity. No, but the goal isn't to fit their picture. He looked directly at Jordan. It's to build rooms where no one has to wonder if they belong in the first place. Jordan nodded, the words settling deep. As the elevator dinged somewhere in the distance and voices began to fill the floor, Malcolm headed back to his office. There were deals to sign, a new partnership on the table, a dozen emails to answer, but there was also something else in the air now, a shift, a recalibration, a standard quietly raised, not by outrage, not by spectacle, but by a man who walked away from a place that refused to see him, so others could walk into one that always would. What is lesson of this story? 1. You don't have to raise your voice to raise the standard. Sometimes the quietest response creates the loudest ripple. 2. Never trade your composure for someone else's ignorance. Leadership isn't about reacting, it's about redirecting power with intention. 3. Respect that comes only after your title is spoken is not real respect. If they don't see your worth before your resume, it's not the right room. 4. The way you respond today becomes the blueprint for those who follow. Lead not just for yourself, but for the ones still watching. 5. You can't force people to see you, but you can refuse to be invisible. Sometimes the greatest strength is simply knowing when to walk away. What do you think about this story? Let's comment below to discuss. And don't forget to subscribe our channel to listen to more interesting stories.